Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. I thought I would do another Mother's Day card. Mother's Day is literally around the corner, and I was flipping through my stamps, and this Spring Bouquet stamp set from Studio Katia jumped out at me, and then I noticed it had a Happy Mother's Day sentiment too, and I was like, I have to use this. So I pulled out my Arteza watercolor paper again. I just did a video showing this watercolor paper and the Arteza real brush pens. Lots of people asking me for the more in-depth review. I will get to it. I'm a little frazzled lately, which is nothing new. Anyway, no more excuses. I cut down some of the paper. I cut it down to A2 size, just 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I'm using my little Tim Holtz Tonic craft or Tonic travel stamp platform. Things have too many names lately. Lined it up in there, and then I used my anti-static powder, the pouch, because again, it was just sitting on my desk, so it was convenient. I said this in the other video too. I don't like using the pouches. I can't stand the feeling of that powder on my fingers. I prefer the little EK Success one that I've been using for years, but the pouch is, and it has always worked really well. You know, I've been using them off and on for over a decade now. So the pouch is great. It's just, it feels gross on the fingers, and it's a pain in the butt to store because the powder just gets everywhere. That's why I love the EK Success one so much more, because it's contained. Anyway, whatever floats your boat for an anti-static pouch. I highly recommend either the pouch or the tool. Just something, because that does really help with preventing the embossing powder from sticking or clinging to anything. So that's what I did. I always use my anti-static powder pouch first, and then I stamped the image with Ink on 3's Juicy Embossing ink, and then I used Simon Says Stamps Detail White Embossing Powder. And then I decided to flip this around, and of course you can't really see it on camera, but I can see where I had stamped and embossed the first image. And then I decided to stamp and emboss the image again, just kind of in the upper left corner, just to fill this out a little bit more. So I did the exact same steps: anti-static powder, the stamping the image with the Ink on 3 Juicy ink, and then melting with my heat tool. Another plug for this heat tool, I just recently got. This is the Wagner one. I had been using one from Stampin' Up that I had had for over a decade. I thought it was fabulous. I thought the one I had was great. I am not kidding. This one blows that one out of the water. Huge difference. It heats up faster. It melts quicker. This Wagner one is amazing. I wish I had got it years ago, and I thought I had the good one. Yeah, no, this one's better. So again, anywho, after everything was melted, had a few seconds to cool off, I am using the Arteza Real Brush pens to do my watercoloring. Again, very simple watercoloring. I'm doing my background first because I want to add some gray. Like I said, this is for the color challenge. The color combo was red, pale yellow, gray, and white, which I had many ideas of what I could do with these colors. I normally wouldn't go for florals with this, but I was like, why not? But I'll, add the gray in as my background. And I did the background first because since I'm going to be working with red especially, but regardless of the color, doing the background first just makes it a lot easier, so I'm not worried about pulling other colors, like accidentally reactivating the red or whatever color I'd be using of the main image and pulling that into my background. So I'm just painting the color on with a gray brush marker first, just right up against the heat embossed images, and then just pulling it out with my water brush. Really simple, letting it fade out, done. So after I did my background, I'm going in and I decided to do obviously yellow and red for the flowers. So I started with my yellow. I saved the red for last because, like I said, red tends to have a mind of its own. Red likes to get everywhere. Red likes to smear, whether you're working with stamping inks or watercolors or just anything to do with red. Red is just a very powerful color and it likes to overpower things. So I generally like to do it last because usually where it ends up going, it's done. There's not a whole lot of fixing it. Whereas things like the yellow, I actually went over the edge with my yellow and got onto one of the leaves, and it was kind of easy to clean it up a little bit, and then I'll just go over it with a gray later. I'm not too worried about it. So I did the yellow, and then I'm adding red to the rest of these flowers. Again, keeping it simple. I'm just scribbling the color on and then moving it around with my water brush. You know, sometimes it's fun to get really fancy and do, you know, layers and the depth. And it's just, it amazes me. I can sit and watch so many people like Christina Werner and Kelly Latavola and Kathy Rakusin and like on and on and on. I could sit and watch, and I do. I watch their videos and I just sit there and just watch them color, and I'm like, just mind boggled every time. It just floors me. I love it. But for me, most of the time, I keep it as simple as possible because I don't have the time and I don't have the patience is the biggest thing, is I just don't have the patience to do all the fancy coloring. So I like to just slap on the color and then move on to the next thing, which is what I did here. So the one thing, again, that I love about the Color Throwdown Challenge is it does kind of push me outside the box a little bit. It makes me think a little bit more about, you know, doing things I wouldn't normally do, like these leaves. I was going to color them green, and then I was like, no, I'm going to stick closer to this color challenge and just do them in a gray. So I did them in a darker gray than the background. And then I added actually a second layer of that same gray. So again, something I wouldn't normally think of. And then after it was completely dry, I die cut it with one of the Studio Katia, the large die from the Dotted Patterns set. And while I was coloring it, I was thinking about splatter. I was going to add splatter to this, and then I got distracted by everything else I have going on right now. And I completely forgot about it until I started editing this video, and then I was like, I forgot the splatter. So yeah, I guess that's proof of how frazzled I am right now, that I'm forgetting to add splatter to my cards. Like, what on earth? So I ran some gray cardstock through my Xyron, little Xyron machine to add adhesive to the back of it. And then I'm just using my little sidekick here to die cut it multiple times. And I'm using the Studio Katia Best Ever. I'm going to use the stamp set and the die set. So the gray cardstock I die cut 4 times with the Best Ever wafer dies, and then I die cut some vellum with the Best Ever outline dies, and then I die cut some yellow cardstock with the little banner die in that set. Hence me using the sidekick, because I did obviously a bunch of little die cuts here. So all these gray cardstock die cuts have adhesive on the back of them now, so I just peel off the backing and I can stack all these together to give it that depth and dimension that just, you know, makes everything pop. So really quick and easy for all of these. And then once I've got all the layers stacked together, I can peel off the final layer on the bottom and adhere that to the vellum outline that I had die cut. So I went along and did all of that with both of the words for Best Ever. And then once I've got everything die cut and stacked, my little yellow banner here, I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool on again. And I'm going to stamp the word mom onto that. And that's the great thing about the Best Ever set, is there's a ton of different words. You know, you've got coach and aunt and teacher, family, brother, sister, parents. You can change it to grandparents, you know, it's got everything. And it's even got the word step. So you can have stepmom, stepdad, etc. So I really like that too. So I stamped the word with the Juicy embossing ink, used the same detail white embossing powder. By this point it's cooled off, so I can remove that anti-static powder from the yellow cardstock. And then to adhere this, I'm just using my little Tonic Nuvo glue pen here and adhering this. And just side note, for those, I've been getting a lot of messages because there's a forum on Facebook that people were talking about using this glue pen with vellum and how it doesn't show through vellum. Honestly, it does for me. I can see it through vellum very easily. If it's over patterns and busier things, it's not as obvious, but if it's a solid cardstock, this adhesive does show through vellum. So that's why I'm not doing a separate video on it, just because I can see it. So for those that can't though, lucky you. I have yet to find a perfect adhesive that doesn't show through vellum, so I always hide it. So I use the glue pen with the banner, and then yes, I use the glue pen behind the cardstock of the vellum die cut sentiments, adhered everything, stacked acrylic blocks on it, let that dry. My card base is more the same yellow cardstock, and I moved it up in my stamp platform because I decided to stamp the flowers kind of lower on the corner. And I'm using a brighter yellow ink from Simon, which is behind me. It is the Lemon Zing ink, because more often than not, when you use the same color when it's yellow, other colors it's not the same, but that's how I said, you know how I said red has an overpowering tendency. Yellow has a very funny tendency to just kind of fade into things a lot easier, especially when you're doing yellow on yellow. So I like to use a lot brighter of a yellow on lighter yellow cardstock. So that's what I stamped flowers in. And then the sentiment is from the spring flower set, and I stamped it in the same color of ink as the gray cardstock. That's Simon's Stone ink, just to keep things soft since I'm not using any black on this card. So I did that. And then the other thing I didn't write down, but I have them right here. You can hear my little containers, are a bunch of Studio Katia crystals. So I have the red heart crystals, which are gorgeous. So I pulled those out, of course, and added a few of those. And then some of the silver foil crystals, which I use a ton of. And then finally some snow crystals, and just kind of liberally applied those to my card front. And then once I was happy with the clusters I had created, I'm just picking them up with my little jewel picker, and I'm using little dabs of multi-medium matte adhesive to adhere those, so that if that adhesive oozes out anywhere, if I use too much, it dries matte so you can't see it. And that's going to finish off my card. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a link to the color throwdown challenge. I'll have a link to all of the supplies used. All that info will be in the description box below the video. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping, commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.